host, Matt the GM, with my co-host, as usual, Jay. What's up, my dude?
Hey, how's it going on? How we doing?
It's going pretty well. We're getting to the very important weeks of the fantasy season, Week 11, and from Week 11 to Week 13. This is when a lot of things are decided on the fantasy docket. So, we got a full lineup of topics today, starting off with our usual week recap, and then going into our studs and Josh Freeman segment. And then we'll close off with some Twitter questions from you, the fans. You can follow us on Twitter at LateRDSleeper, where you can ask us anything and everything fantasy football related. But first, this edition of the Late Round Sleeper Fantasy Football Podcast is presented to you by Buffalo Wings and Rings. Come for the game, stay for the wings. Buffalo Wings and Rings, official sponsor of the Late Round Sleeper Fantasy Football Podcast. All right, Jay, let's get into our recap for Week 10. First game, Cowboys Saints, Drew Brees doing what Drew Brees does. Had 4 TDs and was getting things going. One of the surprising stat lines of this game was Marcus Colston, who's been a fantasy zombie all season long, had 7
quote-unquote fantasy zombie.
Yes, he has. But he has arose from the fantasy dead, had 7 catches for a $107 and 1 TD. Jay, are you really buying this Marcus Colston performance?
Actually I am. I was thinking prior to this game that I believe that the opposing defenses are going to start focusing a lot more on Darren Sproles, Jimmy Graham, of course. So, that only opens up some room for Marcus Colston, and even down the stretch as well. I think he's a great option going forward.
Right. And speaking of Colston, I needed him to step up for my own sake in Week 10. I was playing Jimmy Graham going into Sunday night. I was down 31. I have Drew Brees as my quarterback, and like I said, my opponent had Jimmy Graham. I ended up winning by 1.5 because Drew Brees got 39 and Graham got about 7.5. So the fact that Marcus Colston stepped up was huge for me and also huge for a lot of other fantasy owners going forward. And also the Saints backfield. We had 3 runners get over 20 fantasy points. Which
unheard of
running backs, Jay, are you buying into going forward? Ingram, Thomas, or Sproles? Which one is the guy to own?
Well, I think from an overall perspective, I'd have to say Darren Sproles. Between Pierre Thomas, this is just my opinion. Pierre Thomas and Mark Ingram, I'm not too sure on who's going to get the majority of the carries. Sproles is not using the running game too much anymore, but I think he's used in space a little more. To me, I just go Sproles.
Right. And it's not often where a team can support 3 fantasy relevant running backs. So the fact that
this isn't going to happen again.
No, this was definitely an aberration. But as far as Mark Ingram, I'm sure he's available in about 70% of leagues. I'm not buying into his performance mostly because it came a lot in garbage time, and Mark Ingram's just not that good. So I think he's the 3rd best running back on that team. And
they're playing against the Dallas Cowboys defense. Sorry to interrupt.
Best game since Tuscaloosa. So I don't think he's worth a roster spot for Mark Ingram. And on the Cowboys side of things, Tony Romo has been very mediocre the last 4 to 5 weeks, has not produced consistently good numbers. And a lot of people like to talk about the Cowboys defense being terrible, but let's not forget that the Cowboys offense has not been good either. Romo struggled, Murray struggled, Des Bryant struggled, Witten struggled. Every Cowboy target and every fantasy relevant player on the Cowboys offense did not play well. So Jay, going forward, if you're a Tony Romo owner and you have a guy like, let's say, Nick Foles on your bench, would you consider benching Romo for a guy like Foles?
That'd be tough to say. I think that's more of a matchup question. If, Romo's going up against a tough opposing defense, then I'd say yes. But as far as Nick Foles, hands down, then I would not say so.
All right, Jay, how about we do a Tony Romo name game? What do you say?
Oh, yeah, sure.
And this is not counting matchups. This is just based on a body of work going forward the rest of the year. Who would you plug in as your starting quarterback for your roster? So Tony Romo or Matt Ryan?
I'll go with Tony Romo on that.
Okay. Tony Romo, excuse me, or Russell Wilson?
Russell Wilson.
I think I would have to agree. Tony Romo or Case Keenum?
Oof. I'm gonna go Tony Romo.
And let's not forget that the Texans are not committed to Keenum as the starting quarterback going forward. There's been rumors that Matt Schaub is still in the mix. I don't know why.
I don't get that.
Because the season is a lost cause. So why not feature one of your younger quarterbacks and see what he can do with the rest of the season?
Yep.
I don't understand. But anyways, okay, one more. Tony Romo or Phillip Rivers?
Phillip Rivers. No question.
Phillip Rivers indeed. All right, next game. Week 10, Lions and Bears. Megatron.
Before you go on real quick, bro, I'm sorry. But just to kind of go back along the whole Dallas game, Murray actually had somewhat of a decent day on the ground. But then once Dallas got behind, I mean, they obviously had to turn away from him once again. And I feel that they turned away from him again, even in the second half. I mean, you and I both witnessed that. So, but yeah, go ahead.
And I don't see that changing the rest of the year. The Cowboys continue to abandon the run game in the second half, and it's really doing a disservice to that offense. All right, so Texans and Cardinals, second game on the docket. Let's see what we have here. Carson Palmer, decent day, 241 yards, 2 touchdowns. A guy that doesn't really have a whole lot of value. But Andre Ellington and Rashard Mendenhall. Ellington with 11 carries, Mendenhall with 13 carries, Jay. We both know that Ellington is the better back, and he's the guy you want to own in terms of fantasy football. But I don't understand why Rashard Mendenhall continues to get at least half the carries on a consistent basis, which really cuts into Ellington's value.
Yeah, it does. And I don't know what Bruce Arians, maybe he's trying to preserve the rookie. I mean, of course, he's not that undersized for a running back. He's 5'8", 199 pounds. I mean, most typical backs are, around the 210, 215, 220 range. But, I mean, I don't know, man. Maybe he's just trying to preserve the health of his running back. But, I mean, I think he should be featured a lot more than what he is still.
So he's very explosive.
Indeed he is.
Explosive. For the Texans, Ben Tate with 15 carries for 56. Arian Foster is out for the year, so there is carries to be given in the Texans' backfield. Tate is running with 4 broken ribs, so you can't expect him to be that productive. But Dennis Johnson, 4 carries for 7 yards. Jay, would you consider Johnson worth a roster spot?
I think he's a handcuff to Ben Tate since he is kind of banged up a little bit.
Yeah.
So I definitely think he's worthy of a roster spot. But as far as maybe starting him in case Tate does go down, I think he probably would be at best a flex option.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Andre Johnson, 5 catches, 37 yards, and 2 TDs on 12 targets. So it seems like Johnson has been a lot more productive since Case Keenum took over as the quarterback. Jay, would you consider Johnson as a top 5 wideout going forward?
I'm going to say top 10. I'm not ready to put him in there with A.J. Green, Calvin Johnson, et cetera. But, I mean, top 10 is obviously a must-start, a receiver. So I'd say top 10.
Top 10 for Andre Johnson. And also, speaking of Case Keenum, Jay, I know we talked about this a little bit earlier, but would you feel comfortable starting him? Maybe not against a team like the Seahawks or whatever's a considered bad matchup, but would you feel confident as Case Keenum as a starting fantasy quarterback?
I do. Realistically, I do. I mean, everybody thought when they played against the Chiefs at this first career start that he was just gonna do god awful. He wasn't gonna, produce anything. And look at what the score was. It was 17-16 against a very treacherous defense. And he's putting up numbers. He really is. So, but yeah, just to answer your question, I think he's he is definitely a reliable starter.
All right. Seahawks and Falcons. Russell Wilson with a pretty good day, 2 TDs, had 20 yards on the ground as well. Marshawn Lynch returned to form, 145 yards and a TD for Marshawn Lynch. He's a top 5 back, and he's pretty much matchup proof as long as he gets his touches, Jay. As long as he gets those touches. But Golden Tate with another good game, 6 catches for $106 and a TD. Jay, where do you see Tate's value going forward the rest of this year?
I don't know. With Percy Harvin returning, I mean, yeah, he's gonna be. The Seahawks and Pete Carroll, they say they're gonna ease him into there, but that's also what the Giants say with Andre Brown. We'll get to that in a sec. With Golden Tate, week 8, he has 5 receptions, 93 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Week 9, 3 receptions, 29 yards, and has just lost in his own little world there, and then returns back. So I don't see the consistency there, and you're going to, of course, want at least the yardage to be there if he's not going to score, you know?
Right. All right, so Jay, let's talk about 2 Falcons that have been 2 of the more disappointing fantasy players this season, Steven Jackson and Roddy White.
Oh, tell me about it. Oh, my gosh.
Steven Jackson, I know you're a Steven Jackson owner. He had 9 carries for 11 yards. That is a 1.2 yards per carry average and a long of 5 yards run. Jay, is Steven Jackson, is he droppable now? Because we just haven't seen the production, and it's been about 5 weeks.
Yeah, I read somewhere if the offensive coordinator, the offensive coordinator admitted that if Steven Jackson gets more carries, that he's the type of guy that's likely to produce more as the game progresses. But this year I don't see it. Jacquizz Rodgers outran him. I mean, he has 3 carries for 31 yards, and it's like I think he's pretty much droppable in all formats of leagues.
Steven Jackson, welcome to Dropsville, unfortunately. Now let's talk about Roddy White. He had 1 catch, 20 yards, was targeted 4 times, but he played 55 of the 57 Falcon snaps. Jay,
which is encouraging.
Yes. Do you still have hope for Roddy White that he can resurrect this horrible season?
I do. I have a lot of hope for him. I'm thinking that he's a really good buy low candidate for you trade deadline folks out there that have their trade deadline hasn't passed yet. So if you're really looking for a receiver and need a receiver down the stretch, I think Roddy White is going to be your guy. And
Jay, just to touch on what you just said, Roddy White has a tough matchup this week against Darrelle Revis. But in weeks, I want to say 12 through 11. Hold on, I'm gonna look it up for you right now, Jay.
Okay.
The schedule for Roddy White really loosens up. Okay, so he has Tampa Bay this week, and in weeks 12 through 15, it gets considerably easier. He has Saints, Bills, Packers, and then Redskins. So, like you said, he could be a pretty good buy low candidate. Because I think he still has time to resurrect this season, which has been terrible.
And I think that defenses, they're gonna realize Roddy White's out there, but I really think they're gonna underestimate, just because he hasn't really had that productive of a game,
right.
They're gonna overlook him. Some defenses, I mean, I don't know who the team may be, but they're gonna overlook him, and he's just gonna have this ridiculous game like he did in seasons past.
Right. Okay. All right. So Lions and Bears. Josh McCown in relief of Jay Cutler had a good game. 6 of 9 for a TD. I'm not really concerned if I'm a Marshall or a Jeffrey owner if Josh McCown is the quarterback because he seems to do a really good job in his efforts replacing Jay Cutler.
Yeah, I don't see anything changing there. Josh McCown, I think. Both receivers, they appear that they're going to be productive. I guess I was wrong about Alshon Jeffrey being affected by it. They seem that it's not phasing them.
For $114 for Jeffrey.
Yeah. And Marshall, 7 receptions, 139 yards, 2 TDs.
Yes, he did. And Jeffrey got 18 targets, so he is involved. Yeah, compared to the 12 for Brandon Marshall. All right, Jay, and speaking of Josh McCown, for those Romo owners out there that have him on a bye, is McCown a viable pickup and play option for those guys?
Oh, yeah, no question about that. I mean, Who's on the schedule for them next?
It's good for the Bears. I don't immediately know, but I'll tell you in just a sec. So go ahead, Jay.
I mean, he's a proven backup quarterback, and so I just think over guys like Scott Tolzien, that are going to be the start of the week.
Yeah.
11 starters for Green Bay. I think that's a way better option.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's a proven guy.
And the Bears play Baltimore this week.
Yes, they do. And, that defense kind of just been inconsistent here and there. So, I mean, I think he's going to fare pretty well. They're playing at Soldier Field, so I don't see any problems there.
Right. And in terms of the Lions, there's really not a whole lot to talk about. Stafford, he gets his. Reggie Bush, good game.
Megatron, of course.
Calvin Johnson doing what Calvin Johnson does. So not a whole lot to talk about. For the Lions, you are starting all of your lines. Eagles and Packers. Wow, the connection between Nick Foles and Riley Cooper continues. Riley Cooper, 3 catches, a $102, and 2 TDs. This guy will not go away, Jay.
You had to remind me of this. What was the first thing that you brought that up? It's okay though. I'm not bitter at all. Nick Foles, I mean, he appears that he's having really good chemistry with Riley Cooper. I mean, 2 consecutive weeks, and even in the weeks past, I mean, Riley Cooper may not have monstrous games that he's had in these past 2 weeks, but
right.
You could just tell between them two.
And Jay, I have a theory why Foles and Cooper continue to connect. They spend a lot of time working with the second unit in practice and the preseason. So these guys have chemistry together because they've played together essentially. So I do think Riley Cooper is a guy worth owning, and I don't think that these past 3 games have been flukish.
No, I don't think it's been flukish either, and I'm actually going to start him this week in our league. So hoping for big things again from Riley Cooper, man.
We can only hope, Jay. For the Packers, Scott Tolzien will start this week. I don't necessarily like that. He had 1 TD and 2 picks last week against Philadelphia. But Jared Boykin, who we thought would really be struck by this quarterback change, had 8 catches for a $112 and 13 targets compared to 10 targets for Jordy Nelson. Is this something that you really believe in going forward?
No, I can't say that's something that I can believe in going forward. The Packers, who are they playing this week?
The Packers play the Giants.
The Packers are playing the Giants.
Yes.
And I think Giants defense, they're coming around a lot. So
yes, they have.
I can't see them doing very well. That Giants pass rush, it seems to be, coming up late. Maybe they're going to make a strong surge to push for the playoffs. So I don't see much success coming out of Tolzien this week. Right,
Jay. I would have to agree with that. Next up, let's see, Jags and Titans. So surprisingly, the Jags pulled out a 29-27 win over the Titans, just like we all predicted, right, Jay?
Oh man, there's a head scratcher on this one. I started the Titans defense over my 49ers defense, which ultimately screwed me in my matchup. But it's all good. I'll just have to move on. But yeah, Jaguars finally pull off a victory. Imagine that.
They did. Maurice Jones-Drew had a touchdown and also had one taken from him by Todman, who also scored as well. But for the Titans, fantasy whack-a-mole, Chris Johnson, he's either 30 points or he's 3. He had 4 tweets for 30 yards, and that was about it for Chris Johnson.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that guy. I mean, I can't really elaborate on him because there's not much to say. It's just CJ 0K being CJ 0K again.
Yes. There's really not a whole lot to trust in terms of Chris Johnson. I would consider him a running back too, simply because he can have those games that, he runs for 135 yards with a touchdown. But the problem with him is that you don't know when those are coming, and they're impossible to predict.
Right, yeah.
And now with Jake Locker now sidelined for the year with his foot injury, Fitzpatrick now takes the reins at quarterback. He did have 2 touchdowns, but Jay, do you think Fitzpatrick being the quarterback hurts guys like Kendall Wright, who were very good with Locker under center?
I don't think it's gonna hurt Fitzpatrick or Kendall Wright, excuse me.
Right.
I think actually Fitzpatrick targeted Kendall Wright more. I think he had a couple more targets with Fitzmagic as the quarterback there. So I don't think it's going to affect him too much. I mean, Kendall Wright seems to be a very legit receiver. He's always getting yardage, and PPR guys out there, maybe he's worth a flex start for you guys. But as far as standard formats, just, temper your expectations, definitely.
Right. Rams and Colts. And the biggest surprise of Week 10 was the emergence of Tavon Austin.
Oh, here we go.
2 catches, 138 yards, and 2 TDs. Both were big TDs as well. But there is a caveat to this. Tavon Austin played only 15 snaps, 15 of the many Rams snaps, and only was targeted 3 times. So 2 of his 3 targets went for touchdowns. Jay, we are not buying into Tavon Austin.
Absolutely not. This is definitely an admiration for sure. 2 receptions, 3 targets. I mean, 3 targets. So imagine if these targets were not bombs. He has an absolute, just very crummy day. So I just don't buy into this whatsoever. And people that held him on your bench all season long, waiting for this explosion day to come and finally finally it came, so I'm going to start him next week. Don't start him.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And earlier, Jay, we mentioned about the possibility of owners being able to drop Steven Jackson. Would you say the same thing for Mr. T. Rich?
Oh, T. Rich.
T4 this year.
Yes, he's done very poor. I'm going to hold off on Mr. T. Rich a little bit, not say drop him just yet. I'm going to say flex at best, though.
Flex at best.
Yes.
You will not find me starting Trent Richardson anywhere. But he has been one of the many lost cause of this fantasy season, Jay.
Barely a flex, by the way. Barely.
Exactly. And unfortunately, he was the number 1 overall pick in our Weekend Warriors League. That owner is regretting that, Jay.
Oh, yeah, no question. He's so mad.
Raiders and Giants, Jay. Not a whole lot to talk about for the Raiders, but Rashad Jennings with a decent day. I don't want to call it good. He had 20 carries for 88 yards, so he is getting the touches, and he is someone that is worth owning, I would assume, right, Jay?
Yeah, he's worth owning. Just simply if you're in a deeper league, or maybe if you're just kind of hammered by injuries, then he's worth a start. But I mean, you're not going to expect much from him.
Right. And for the Giants, Andre Brown is available in way too many fantasy leagues out there. If he's available in your league, he needs to be your number 1 target if you haven't picked him up already. 30 carries for $1.15. And Jake, whatever happened to the Giants easing in Andre Brown, trying to keep him healthy? What happened to that? 30 touches?
The aforementioned easing him into the lineup. He doesn't even split carries. He's the predominant back right off the bat. So
Peyton Hillis actually started the game and then fumbled his first carry, and from then on out, it was a 30-4 split between Brown and Hillis.
Oh my gosh. I mean, perhaps maybe they were going to try to ease him in, and I wasn't aware that Peyton Hillis fumbled the first snap, so that would explain that. I mean, obviously, Andre Brown is the most trustworthy back in New York, and they're going to be heavily dependent on his workload for sure.
All right, Jay. Bills and Steelers. E.J. Manuel was horrible in this game. Absolutely horrible.
His first game back, so I mean, I'm not going to really.
It was.
From that leg injury, so I'm not going to really hold him too much for that.
Yes, the backfield split for the Bills. Fred Jackson with 12 carries compared to C.J. Spiller and his 8. Jay, I don't really know what to say about this. This has been a mess all season long. Spiller appears to be healthy, but it kind of appeared to me that he was trying to break too many runs off to the outside instead of just being patient, trying to find a hole. So I think right now Fred Jackson is the back to own. But if you are a Spiller owner, I mean, you're still starting him in hopes of that big game. But Jay, I just don't think it's coming.
I don't think it's coming either. I mean, you don't know when it's going to happen. And
exactly.
Quite frankly, I mean, Fred Jackson is still getting the goal line carries, and so
Yes.
that means CJ Spiller owners are heavily dependent on the big play runs.
Right. Right. And for the Steelers, Le'Veon Bell did not have a great game in terms of his yards per carry average, but he did find the end zone, which is encouraging. So he is getting goal line carries, and he is the primary back, only 6 carries for Jonathan Dwyer. So
25 touches for him, by the
yes,
way.
5 touches for Le'Veon Bell. Jay, is he a running back 2, low end or high end?
Low end too. We have guys, of course, that are upper echelon that we could actually rely on to be higher number 2. But Le'Veon Bell, like you said, his yards per carry average sometimes is a little bit questionable.
Yep.
I mean, maybe he has to deal with that Pittsburgh offensive line, but I mean, he does find the end zone.
Yes, and the Steelers do want to run the football.
Absolutely.
They will continue to give him touches. Bengals and Ravens. Andy Dalton, talk about fantasy whack-a-mole. He is the definition of a fantasy whack-a-mole with another very poor game through 3 interceptions and 2 touchdowns, one of those going to A.J. Green. We are not surprised of that. And the other going to Giovanni Bernard, who is breaking out in the second half of the year, has 2 straight games of more than 15 points. Jay, is Giovanni Bernard starting to kind of get the majority of the work over Ben Jarvis, Jay?
I think he is. He's starting to look like he's the primary back. I mean, Ben Jarvis, he didn't have a very productive game. And as long as they see more production out of Bernard, I mean, I wouldn't see a reason why they wouldn't give him more carries and more touches.
Bernard with 14 carries for 58 yards, which is a 4.1 average compared to Ben Jarvis's 9 for 36, which was also good at a 4.0 average. But he's just really not that explosive, and he is the goal line back, but Bernard did get a goal line carry 2 weeks ago. So it's really tough if you're a Green Ellis owner. I don't think he's someone worth starting at this point in time. Jay, for the Ravens, Ray Rice.
Oh, my God.
A moment of silence to weep over the pathetically bad performance of Ray Rice this season. 18 carries for 30 yards, 1.7 yards per carry, Jay. Ray Rice, is he even worth starting at your flex spot anymore?
Oh, I'm a Ray Rice owner, and gosh, he absolutely killed me. So I'm gonna take a moment of silence here. He's not worth starting anymore. Just get him out of your starting lineup. I have him out of mine. Don't even bother with him anymore.
I know you're waiting for the big games, Ray Rice owners, but you know what? Ray Rice is not the same guy. He really looks like he lost a lot of lateral quickness, and it's just not there for him anymore. So I think Ray Rice is now on the downfall. The fall of Ray Rice, just like the fall of Rome, Jay. So you know what? I kind of wish the Ravens would give more carries to Bernard Pierce because he ran 8 carries for 31 yards.
31 yards is actually semi-productive.
Yeah, so he seems to be more productive, but I doubt he would get the bulk of the work over Rice. So he's just going to have to be stashed on your bench. Jay, would you even consider dropping Rice?
Not quite. I mean, we're just hoping that he does something. I mean, he's still a starting running back, so I mean, I wouldn't drop him quite yet. Steven Jackson, on the other hand, I mean, he's very injury prone and he's up there in age, so he's worth dropping. All
right, Jay. Panthers and 49ers. Your Panthers are
yes.
Not a whole lot to talk about in terms of fantasy because this was a matchup of 2 very good defenses playing each other. So both teams' offensive weapons really struggled.
Other than D'Angelo Williams, he was the only player that found the end zone.
Yes, but speaking of D'Angelo, it appeared that Jonathan Stewart got more carries and got kind of the bulk of the work over D'Angelo, which is concerning.
Yeah. I mean, if you're a D'Angelo Williams owner, perhaps maybe it is concerning. Maybe it's going to be a timeshare between the two, just to keep both backs healthy, as it appears that the Panthers are pushing for a playoff spot, so they definitely want to keep their starters healthy for the remainder of the season.
Right, okay, Broncos and Chargers, Peyton Manning with 4 TDs. Three of those going to Demaryius Thomas. You
Oh,
have 7
perfect.
catches for $108. We know what the Broncos do. We know their weapons. We know that they're productive. We're going to leave it at that. But for the Chargers, Phillip Rivers did not have as good of a game as he has been. Did have 1 touchdown, but Jay, Phillip Rivers is not turning the ball over this year, which is a good sign.
Yes, it's a very good sign. 2 seasons past, maybe even 3 seasons.
It was brutal.
It was brutal. I mean, Phillip Rivers just looked like a completely different person. We all thought it was somebody else in a Phillip Rivers costume.
That's right.
But he's not turning the ball over. It's important. I think Ken Wisenhunt as the offensive coordinator is just doing a fantastic job over there in San Diego.
And the Chargers backfield, Ryan Matthews with 14 carries for 59 yards and a touchdown. Danny Woodhead with 6 carries for 27, but of course he had 4 catches for 17 and a TDJ. We know how the Chargers like to operate in terms of the backfield. Ryan Matthews is the runner. Danny Woodhead is the pass catcher. So when the Chargers are trailing, when they are playing catch-up, Danny Woodhead is the guy that they're going to use. But when they are in run out the clock mode, Matthews is going to get the work. So it's really tough to know going into a week who's really going to be productive. But going forward, I like Woodhead and I do like Matthews. As much as it hurts me to say, I do like both backs. Even Matthews, who seems to be so inconsistent, but you just kind of have to
I can't blame you, though. I can't.
Yeah, exactly. Because Matthews has been good. He has been efficient on the ground, and Woodhead has also been very efficient through the air. So you basically just have to play matchups in terms of Matthews and really trying to predict if the Chargers will be playing from behind or not, because that's really what Matthews depends on.
Right.
All right, and for the Chargers as well, Keenan Allen only had 4 catches for 41, Jay. Is this just a bad game for Keenan Allen, or is he starting to come back down to earth a little bit?
Maybe a little bit of both, but I mean he's still the number 1 option in San Diego. Eddie Royal's very touchdown dependent.
Yes.
Honestly, Keenan Allen is probably just a little bit of a bad game. Maybe he's coming back down to earth a little bit, but he's still worthy of a number 2 wide receiver, I believe.
And Monday Night Football, the Dolphins took on the Buccaneers. Jay, there's really not a whole lot about.
Do you want to talk about the Thursday night game instead, maybe?
Well, that is come and gone, Jay. But Lamar Miller really, really struggled. 7 carries for 2 yards. He was looking so good the last 3 weeks, Jay, and he just kind of fell off this game. So Lamar Miller, I don't know if I would ever be confident starting him. He would have to have a fantastic matchup, which doesn't look like it's going to happen. But one of the few bright spots for the Dolphins was Rashard Matthews. Had 11 catches, $120.
Wait, who?
Rashard Matthews.
Wow. Okay.
Yes.
Filling in for Brandon Gibson, though.
Yes. 11 catches, $120, and 2 TDs. Jay, this is just one of those games, isn't it?
It's got to be one of those games. He's not going to have 11 catches for 120 yards and 2 TDs. But going forward, I mean, maybe this is a guy to keep on your radar. I'm not going to say stash him quite yet because in the game before where he filled in for Brandon, he did not produce. He had 2 catches for 20-something yards, I believe.
Yes, but Brandon Gibson is out for the season, so he is no longer a factor.
Right. Yeah, I mean, he's no longer a factor, but I just don't see huge games coming like this from Rashard Matthews again, but he will be targeted. I will say that.
Well, Matthews did very well, but we look at Mike Wallace. He only had 4 catches for 15, and Mike Wallace has been up and down, but mostly down this
season.
But in terms of Matthews, I would only pick him up if I had one of those roster spots that was basically just what I like to call a garbage spot. So basically, you can just kind of pick up guys and just hope that they turn out to be something good. But if you have a bench that is filled with productive players, I don't think it's worth dropping someone, let's say like Dennis Johnson for a guy like Matthews. But if you have one of those spots, it's kind of worth picking him up and just see where he goes the rest of the year. maybe it was just one of those games. Maybe he'll be productive. We can only wait and see. All right, Jay, for the Buccaneers.
Let me ask you this real quick before you go on with the Bucks. Would you pick up Rashard Matthews and drop Mike Wallace?
I don't think I would do that. No, I don't think. No.
Okay.
No, Wallace has been bad, but we know what he can do. And while it's probably not going to happen, I'm not quick enough on the gun to really buy into Rashard Matthews yet.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I think the same though. Absolutely.
Yeah. And for the Bucks, we obviously know no Doug Martin, and unfortunately now no Mike James, who is out for the year with a broken ankle. So Jay, who do we pick up? Brian Leonard or Bobby Rainey?
God, it's really tough for Mike James. It looked like he was coming along.
Having a great game. Had 5 carries for 41 yards.
Yeah, he looked like he was on the verge of having a monster game.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, I think just looking at the production from Brian Leonard, I mean, 20 carries for 57 yards. I mean, that's not very productive at all.
Not very explosive, and he's just not a great runner in space.
He's not very elusive. I mean, it looked like he was trying to be patient with his blocks, with the blocks developing, but I mean, he just wouldn't explode. But on the other hand, Rainey, I just saw a lot more explosion, agility, and quickness. He had a 23-yard scamper for a touchdown.
And 20 yards.
The only score of the fourth quarter, by the way, in that game.
That is correct. Rainey is a guy that is playing for his 3rd team this season, so I don't know how good he is, but he looked good on Monday night, so I think he's worth a pickup. All right, Jay, so that's it for the Week 10 recap. We're now going to segue into the best segment of the week, which is the Studs and Josh Freemans. And if you don't know what the Josh Freemans are, they are players that play like Josh Freeman, which is very, very poor. So, Jay, go ahead and start us off with your first stud of Week 10.
My first stud of Week 10 is going to be RG3. This guy has been a little inconsistent, but I mean, I would really hope to see this guy just outburst down the stretch. He had 281 yards, 24-37, 3 touchdowns, 7 carries for 44 yards. So maybe perhaps he will top off the 100-yard mark sometime this season. That would be very interesting. But you're up, bro.
All right, Jay, my first stud of Week 10 is going to be Drew Brees, who is a guy that I traded for in our league a couple weeks ago, and that has been one of the best moves that I have made all season long. Drew Brees had, he had 392 yards through the air and 4 TDs, and absolutely, I guess he basically performed surgery on the Cowboys secondary, which is banged up. They had a lot of guys go out with an injury.
It's definitely not difficult to perform surgery on the Dallas Cowboys defense, though.
It is not. The Cowboys are not a very good football team. So while I was not surprised that Drew Brees had a huge day, it is very impressive nonetheless, Jay.
Yes, it is. And my second stud of this week happens to be on the Broncos roster. His name is Demaryius Thomas. He's come alive, it appears, the past 3 weeks. Catching at least 1 touchdown in the past 3 weeks, 7 receptions, 108 yards, 3 TDs with 10 targets for Week 10, and he had a really strong performance. And it appears that Peyton Manning is at least feeding 2 targets with touchdowns. But I mean, it remains to be seen who is the primary target for Peyton Manning.
Yep. All right, Jay. My next stud is Giovanni Bernard. He had 14 carries for 58 yards. But also, he is a pass catcher, had 8 catches for 37 yards and 1 touchdown, and caught all 8 of his targets. And this is a guy that is in a running back platoon, but is still finding a way to be productive despite having to share carries with Green Ellis. I like Bernard going forward, he was a stud.
And this stud is unlikely. It's probably one that you will never hear again. Pierre Thomas,
wow.
As the aforementioned New Orleans Saints backfield, all scoring at least 20 points, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Pierre Thomas, 17 carries for 87 yards, a touchdown, and then 7 receptions, 24 yards, and a touchdown on 7 targets. Again, temper your expectations when it comes to Pierre Thomas and Mark Ingram, as we do not know who will get the majority of the work.
True.
Darren Sproles, you could even mention him in that, but I just trust Darren Sproles a lot more going forward.
And Jay, speaking of a guy that is going to get the majority of the work, that guy is Andre Brown, had 30 carries for a $115 and a touchdown. So much for easing him back into action. Andre Brown is the back for the Giants. He had a good game, and I like him going forward, Jay.
Absolutely, you are. Now we are going to go into our worst portion of this show. We are going to be doing our Josh Freemans. Unfortunately, Tony Romo, 10 of 24, 128 yards and a touchdown, and just not very good, man. Not at all. Just a very poor performance.
And also, speaking of guys that were also not very good, that guy is Dez Bryant. It's supposed to be just as good as Calvin Johnson.
Setup.
Yes, Dez Bryant, one catch for 44 yards. Jay, I don't think he's just as good as Calvin Johnson. I don't think Dez Bryant knows what he's talking about.
I don't know what he was talking about either. I mean, you gotta like the confidence though, but I mean, just he is not on his level.
But Jay,
not quite yet.
To Dez Bryant's defense, it doesn't seem like the Cowboys try to get him the ball because, all right, so let's take Calvin Johnson, for example. Matthew Stafford forces the ball to Megatron. He absolutely forces it in the double, triple coverage. He just throws it up and trusts that Megatron is going to come down with it. Tony Romo needs to develop that same trust with Dez Bryant because he is good enough to go over corners, to go over safeties, and just catch passes that are up for grabs.
Absolutely. I think there needs to be a little bit more trust. Dez Bryant is 6'2", I believe.
Yeah, and he is an athletic freak.
He's a very athletic freak, and he does have mad hops, but, I mean, Calvin Johnson does have that 3-inch advantage over him, so I think I can see why Matthew Stafford just throws it up there and hoping that Megatron comes down with it.
But you have to find a way to get your best playmaker the ball.
You do. I would agree with.
All right, Shay.
Eddie Lacy is going to be my second Josh Freeman of this week. 24 carries for 73 yards. 24 carries for 73. Wow. And 2 receptions for 11 yards. Just after the past couple of weeks where he's just obliterating defenses on the ground. And you know, I mean, of course, maybe an Aaron Rodgers-less Green Bay Packer team probably has an effect on Eddie Lacy and James Starks going forward. But I mean, that was just a bad week for him.
That was. All right, Jay. Victor Cruz is my next Josh Freeman. He had 3 catches for 37 yards. He did have 10 targets, so they're trying to get him the ball. He just didn't catch any of those targets. I am a Victor Cruz owner, and I've been waiting for him to break out for the past 4 or 5 weeks, and he hasn't danced much since week 4, Jay, unfortunately.
No salsaing for Victor Cruz there, so it's kind of unfortunate.
Yeah, been a whole lot of salsa lately.
Oh, not at all. I think we ran out of the salsa.
I hope not.
Jimmy Graham is going to top off my Josh Freemans for this week. A very, very unusual candidate for Josh Freeman, definitely. I did not expect him to see him on this list ever again. He had 5 catches, only 5 receptions for 59 yards on 5 targets. At least he caught all of his targets, Matt. But we're definitely not expecting this to ever happen again. So
we can only hope that will never happen again. All right, Jay. So my last Josh Freeman, and to conclude this segment, is going to be Matt Forte, who has been very.
Oh wow, that was very brutal.
He has probably been, besides Jamal Charles, the most consistent fantasy running back. He had 17 carries for 33 yards against a Detroit defense, which is underrated, but still, he's Matt Forte, and that was just a very bad game, Chet. All right, Jay, so that'll do it for our Studs and Josh Freemans of Week 10, everyone's favorite segment. We're now going to parlay into some Twitter questions, and as we mentioned frequently, you can follow us on Twitter at LateRDSleeper, where you can ask us anything and everything fantasy football related, Jay. All right, so the first one on the docket, Jay, we have a guy who is a Tony Romo owner, and he is wondering if he should pick up Josh McCown or Ryan Fitzpatrick.
What are the matchups?
And that is from at badguy_Zim.
Let's see. Fitzpatrick is going up against the Colts on Thursday night,
Mm-hmm.
who, I mean, the Rams just tore them up. And then we have, who was the other player that he?
It was Josh McCown, who we mentioned earlier was playing. I can't even remember.
Yeah, they're playing the Ravens.
Nope.
I think Josh McCown, I'd start Josh McCown. Just simply look at his targets. He has Brandon Marshall, Alshon Jeffrey. They're way better targets than Kendall Wright, Nate Washington. So I'd go with Josh.
Okay. Next up, Jay, we have a tweet from @Dexter_Lee9. And this is a starter sit question. All right, so at the running back position, he has to start 2 out of 3. We have Andre Ellington, Eddie Lacy, and Chris Ivory. Personally, I'm going Ellington and Lacy. Jay, what do you got?
I think I'm going to have to agree with you on that. Chris Ivory, he had, before the bye week, he had a super duper workload, but I mean, we've seen this before where it looks like Chris Ivory's separating himself as the primary back, but Bilal Powell just comes out of nowhere. Bilal Powell.
Yes, Bilal Powell. Everyone's favorite fantasy running back.
So I think I'm going to go Andre Ellington and Eddie Lacy.
All right, Jay, and there's a second part to this tweet. He needs to start 3 out of the next 4 wide receivers. They are Percy Harvin, Riley Cooper, Jordy Nelson, and Keenan Allen, Jay. And before you go on, I am excluding Percy Harvin. I think this is his first week back. I don't trust he's going to be productive right away. So I think we can agree that we're going Cooper, Nelson, and Allen.
Absolutely.
All right, Jay. This one is not as for sure. This is from @IEAboutCream. And, this is at his flex spot. A pretty good flex to have, by the way. Andre Ellington or T.Y. Hilton.
Oh, wow.
And he mentioned Ray Rice as well, but I think we can just throw that out.
Yeah, we can throw Ray Rice out the window.
Yeah.
Is this a PPR league or is it a standard league?
You know, he did not clarify. He did not, but I'm assuming it's a standard because most people that are in PPR leagues
they mentioned PPR, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna go just because Andre Ellington we don't know what the outlook is gonna be for his production or for his workload.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to say T.Y. Hilton.
Okay, I would have to agree with you. Despite the Titans giving up the least amount of fantasy points to opposing wide receivers, I still like T.Y. Hilton because he is the only target for Andrew Luck right now.
He is indeed.
So he is going to get the targets, he'll get the looks, and we think he will have a good day. All right, Jay, this one is from @Cataract2 on Twitter. And he says, I picked up Giants D last week and it paid off. Should I play them against Green Bay without Rodgers or go with Pats Monday night?
I think that Patriots game is definitely a trap game.
Yes.
Panthers just came off a huge win against San Fran in their own stadium. I think I'm going to go with the Giants against the Scott Tolzien operated offense.
I was thinking the exact same thing, Jay. Giants D it is. All right, let's keep scrolling down here. All right, Jay, this is from @AdamC, and he has a trade question.
Oh.
He's been offered MJD and Hakeem Nicks for Wes Welker. Do I bite? I don't know.
What?
You're not biting on that.
You are not even getting near that appetizer. What are you talking about?
Definitive no.
No, that is a definite no. That's an all caps definite no.
All right, Jay, so let's go ahead and move on from that one. This one isn't as for sure either. This is also from @IEAboutCream, and he has a starter sit question between Tom Brady or Andrew Luck. Personally, I'm going Luck. Brady plays the Panthers, and that defense is legitimate.
Indeed, it is. The second-ranked defense overall in the NFL. They're holding opposing offenses to barely 200 yards. I believe it's 203 yards passing, only holding opposing offenses to 82 yards rushing. I am starting Andrew Luck, and Andrew Luck is looking to get revenge, and I think he has a big week against the Titans.
I think he has it as well, Jay. Well said. All right, our last Twitter question of the day is from at Adam C. Morales, and he wants to know if he should start Golden Tate or T.Y. Hilton.
I'm gonna have to say, who does the Seahawks play? The Vikings.
Yes, they do play the Vikings.
Wow.
Vikings the third most points to opposing wide receivers compared to T.Y. Hilton's matchup against the Titans, which is the least. However, I think I'm leaning towards T.Y. Hilton because, as we mentioned earlier, he is the primary target for Andrew Luck. I think he does get the targets. I think
he does. I agree with you on that.
Really trust Golden Tate to be consistent for 3 straight weeks.
Yeah, you're right. I don't see that happening. Maybe this is Jermaine Kearse's week. Maybe this is Doug Baldwin's week. I mean, we don't know.
Maybe it's even Percy Harvin's week because, like we mentioned earlier, the Giants said that they were going to ease Andre Brown, and that didn't happen. So you just never know.
Right.
So I think this is a situation where you just have to take talent over matchups because T.Y. Hilton is the more talented wide receiver of the two.
Indeed.
All right, Jay, that's all we have for today. And as we mentioned earlier, this episode of the Late Round Sleeper Fantasy Football Podcast has been presented to you by Buffalo Wings and Rings. Come for the game, stay for the wings. Buffalo Wings and Rings, official sponsor of the Late Round Sleeper Fantasy Football Podcast. Jay, good luck in Week 11, and fantasy footballers out there, good luck as well.
Good luck to everyone, and good luck to you, the GM, and I will see you guys later.
Peace out.